Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Paul Amos, founder of The Redeemed. In 2020, I formed The Redeemed as a way for men to come together to form a special community that supports men through the difficulties of life as well as the triumphs over those difficulties. This month, we're going through a very special series where we're celebrating families. And today I have the pleasure of having my own son, Mansell Amos, on the show with us. Mansell, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Dad.
Absolutely. It's an honor. I have to admit, I've had wonderful and large people on the show. I've had people of all different facets with all different backgrounds, and somehow I think I'm more nervous to interview my own son than I am to interview anybody else. But we're going to get through it, and we're going to enjoy ourselves, and maybe he won't even embarrass good old Dad in this interview. Mansell, because I know you, but others may not, we'd love to start with some rapid-fire questions. You mind? All right. For favorite food?
This is actually kind of a loaded question. If I'm going to give a basic answer, I'm just going to go with steak.
Steak, nice. Favorite pastime?
I'll say playing Madden.
Playing Madden. If you're not playing football, how are you working out?
In terms like physically?
Yeah.
Doing some sort of CrossFit workout.
Book you're reading right now?
I just finished Tender Warrior, and now I'm starting a book by John Bevere called The Awe of God.
Awesome. Plans for the summer?
Plans for summer. So I'm working at Church of the Highlands under my youth pastor for the time I'm here, and then for all of June, I'm going to a Christian sports camp called Kanakuk.
Let's hit on both those topics throughout today.
All right, awesome.
All right, let's just start with your salvation. You obviously are a very, very devout Christian young man. And at some point early on, you began to become a Christian. For those that don't know Mansell's background, his two great-grandmothers, when he was born and baptized, felt like he had an incredibly strong calling on his life as a future Christian leader. And that has turned out to be potentially very true. But while that may have been from the very beginning, you had a chance to choose. Tell us a little bit about your first salvation.
How you define salvation is interesting. For me, the first time I accepted Jesus into my heart was the night actually before I went to go be a camper at Kanakuk for the first time. For me, I was authentic. I really meant it. But a lot of my story is like the fact that like I had to continually have a journey back to God. And I think the relationship aspect is something that I lacked up until I was 17. So, yeah.
What was it like that first night to say that prayer before you went to camp, before you went on this wonderful place to be with God? How did it feel?
God says, enter the kingdom like a child. And so for me, like just having that like initial, like him coming into me and like could feel his presence, it was so freeing, so joyful. But I mean, I let it go. And I think that feeling that was so good, I wish I would have kept on with it.
Obviously, there are elements to your faith. There are different things that have attributed to it over a period of time. And I know you've been through a journey that's been up and down. But maybe you could talk for a minute about some of the key elements of your faith that have been formed throughout your teenage years.
Man, I think the biggest thing for me is like something that a pastor I got to hear from many times always says is, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And the way I responded to this is discipleship. I think the way I've been formed, my faith is being discipled. I think like who you're around is who you become. So like continually being around guys who are going to push you to the cross, guys who are going to push you to be the best version of yourself has really helped form me. Yeah.
Where did you start that discipleship journey?
For me, it was on a journey of coming back to church. I think I put on a face for a long time, but really actually being mentored and discipled came back when I went to Church of the Highlands for the first time. And the youth pastor at our campus, Josh, he really took me under his wing and really guided me and helped me and really showed me how to walk with Christ.
You attend an amazing college in Wheaton for Christ and his kingdom as their theme. Yeah. So you get an opportunity to see churches of all different types, from the very traditional to the very modern. you've obviously just said you thrived under Church of the Highlands, but I also know that you thrived under St. Paul and United Methodist Church here in Columbus, and you're still friends with Shane Green and still talk to him. Talk a little bit about your experience in the breadth of churches that are out there and kind of how you plug and play into different ones.
I think the thing is there's no church that's better than one another. It's just whatever fills your soul, whatever feeds you on a weekend. So like for me, like I'm very contemporary worship. I'm very modern worship. That's like my favorite kind of deal. I love coming in. It's like a rock concert. That's what fills my soul. But for some people, the communal gathering of hymnals is going to be the way you celebrate worship. And I think it's like there's no right way to do it. So I think having all different different services is so good. Pastor Green's been incredible in my life. He just continues to call me, continues to uplift me. I call him when I'm prepping for sermons. I call him when I'm planning to speak, and I continue to talk to him. I'm actually grabbing breakfast with him next week, and he's been an incredible mentor to me. But on top of that, I just found that St. Paul wasn't necessarily the place that best suited my gifts, and I think it's an incredible church, and I think it's amazing. It just wasn't where I felt like I was getting fed the way I needed to.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So Church of the Highlands is a unique place, and it's someplace that really has brought out and blossomed in you. Talk a little bit about your experience in being both a member of the congregation as well as being a leader at Church of the Highlands.
Something that is hard and a lot of people assume is because it's such a big church that you don't get to know everybody. I would actually argue with that because I feel like the church that we attend is so it's so good at discipleship and like small groups and finding ways you can get connected with people. And I think for me, like attending there has been so amazing because I have had so many people reach out to me, pour into me, have so many people come up. If you come on a Sunday and it's like you have 40 people who come greet you, give you a smile, say, hey, how are you doing? And it's been amazing. It's such a welcoming environment. The pastor is standing at the front of the door, says, how are you doing? What's your name? Like makes you feel right at home. Getting involved in leadership there and getting involved in getting to be, with others, it's really amazing. So for me, it's just like getting to pour into others after I've been poured into is such a blessing because it's like, man, like all these people like really wanted to just show the love of Jesus, be the hands, feet of Jesus and pour into me. And now I get to respond back with pouring into those of the next generation, which is so amazing.
That's awesome. That's great that you have that opportunity and that you've been able to connect in a macro way. Let's dial it back a little bit. Let's go back to the beginning and let's talk a little bit about, some people on the outside might look at you and say, Brookstone graduate, college football player, Christ follower, leader in the church, this kid's got it all. And yet that journey to get there, I know from a firsthand view, has not been easy. And so maybe you can take a moment and let's just talk through some of the tougher times and some of the things that might inspire our listeners and especially our young folks about how your journey along the way led you to the place that you're in today.
Yeah, awesome. What do you want to know?
Well, let's start with the fact that, I went through a divorce with your mom, and that sparked a whole lot of things in your life that were difficult. And maybe you can talk for a few minutes about, the impact that our family beginning to separate had on your life.
Yeah, I think it took a huge toll. In 8th grade, you don't really, your brain's not developed fully. The male doesn't get developed at 27, so I still got a ways to go. But it was like, man, it's just you don't understand what's going on, and you feel really confused. And man, when you feel confused and you don't know what's going on, and you're not biblically rooted, you're not founded in Christ, the thing is, you're going to start turning to things of this world. And for me, even as early as 8th grade, I started turning to drinking. And it was super hard, and I was confused, and I didn't know what was going on. But, I was seeking out something. I was seeking out some fulfillment. And it was really hard because I couldn't understand what was going on with my parents. So I was just turning to ways of this world, and it was really difficult.
That had to feel very lonely, and you had to feel very separated because the truth is, as a father, I didn't know. Maybe I was blind to it. Maybe I had my head turned in the wrong direction, but you kept it under wraps. Some kids put it out there in the front. You kept it under wraps. How alone did you feel in those moments?
It's really hard. Something since I've little, and part of why I love meeting with people is because I have a heart after people. I want to always see people being like as happy as possible, fulfilling everything they want. So when I see two hurting people who are leaving a relationship, I didn't want to put my burdens on others when they already felt so burdened. So for me, it was like I had to, you know what I had to do? I had to show up with a good game face, show up like I wasn't, that was completely all good so that I could be the supporter for my parents when I wasn't able to be supported. And I think it was really hard because it's like you want to show your parents like you've got it all together and you're doing all things right, but really you're just broken and hurting on the inside.
Yeah. There became a point in our relationship where you had to lay down the law, where you had to say, Dad, I don't believe that we're on the right path, and I don't believe that we're going in the right direction. And you called me Paul instead of Dad. Talk for a minute about what it felt like to have that type of separation among you and a parent.
I think for me, just to go a little bit deeper here, I think there was a lot more than just the mistakes that happened in the past. I think for me, you and I weren't very close growing up, and it was really difficult. I always felt like you favored our older brother just because you guys are naturally more alike, and it was really hard for me. And I think like going into that relationship with you, and then like the fact that like our family had just like started coming back together again after you had like left your job to spend more time with us, and now that separation was coming through. There are mistakes that had happened. I think it was really hard on me. And I think I was like, you know what? I don't want to seek a relationship with this person because they'd hurt me so much already. And now they're separating it's the cause of the separation of my family, which is really difficult on me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, Mansell.
Oh man, it's in the past. I think, you know, like I think we can't hold, like Christ doesn't hold on to anything that we do. And so, like, we all deserve forgiveness, like, from each other. Like, if we profess to be Christians, we should forgive everybody. And, like, that's how you know we weren't living it out. Because instead of caring for you and sitting with you, I rejected you and shamed you. And that's the opposite of what we've been called to do as Christ followers.
I very much accept the grace that you've given me and the love that you've shown me. And I want to get to that part, but I'd be remiss if I didn't take a moment and just tell you how much I love you and how much this experience of being your earthly father has been both a difficult journey and one that has grown me as a human being.
Yeah.
Let's talk for a minute about a little bit of the redemption that happened between you and me, and talk a little bit about you came to spend some time with me, a larger portion than you necessarily needed to, living with me half the time. And over that time, we formed an incredibly special bond.
Yeah, well, kind of leading up to those moments, like, I feel like you and I had, like, already gone back to our relationship. Like, I remember the moment that I, like, fully forgave you. I was, like, we were sitting, I remember the moment I told you on the couch and we were up on vacation. I was like, Dad, I'm not calling you that anymore. Your name is Paul now. And then I also remember the moment when we were driving down Green Island Drive right past the bridge, and I said, Dad, I forgive you. And I remember you pulled over and you broke down crying because, like, that moment was so big for you. And I just remember, like this is where it's going to get serious. And I think it was really hard because you were going through so much, and for those couple of years, it was really hard on you. But then that period that I got to live with you was so incredible. I mean, while it was hard and the circumstances I got there weren't the easiest, I think it was honestly, like, I'm so thankful for it. Like, I wouldn't take any of it back because you and I have grown so much closer because of it. And you and I got to continually sit together, watch basketball games every night. We got to go do stuff together. We got to do stuff I never got to do. But all that stuff that I missed out in my childhood, that I felt like you and I weren't very close and you were always gone, I got to do. I got to be the only child with you. And I think I got to see the man who you were before, who really wasn't that much involved in my life, to the man who you had become, who would text me every single night saying, hey, let's go do something. Hey, let's go do something. How can I pray for you? How can I be there for you? And I just, like, I watched God change you when I was so broken. And honestly, it made me love Christ more because I got to see him through you.
Okay, this is the part when, as the interviewer, I want to cry. And rather than being able to, like, keep my stuff together, this is hard. But it's incredible to be in this venue with you and to celebrate with you and to talk with you. And thank you for sharing this with our audience because I think it's so important. That wasn't the end of the challenges that you faced. In fact, perhaps one of the most difficult challenges that you faced was about your injury. And maybe for a minute you can talk about what it was like to have something so precious taken from you and the fear that that placed in your heart.
Yeah, in your whole life you spend loving something so worldly in football. It's amazing. And, it's a great game, and there's no game like it. Not one person can cause the game to win. You have to have 11 guys come together to either execute an offensive play perfectly or to they have defense stop perfectly. If one person messes up, the whole play's messed up. And so I think it's like nothing's more team oriented than football. And so, like my whole life, I wanted to play in college, I wanted to do this. All I talked about was sports. And to have that taken away from you in an instant, in a moment, it was really tough. It was really difficult. To have a doctor look you in the face and say, you're never going to play again. And at that moment, like you just have nothing else but to surrender it. You have nothing else but to surrender your life to something bigger than yourself. So while it was so painful, and even after that moment when I was in surrender, it was still hurtful. I'm so grateful it happened because it led to so many greater things.
There is a triumphant end to the story. You are a college football player now. You're a successful kid. You are helping the Wheaton team be successful. Tell me about the overcoming part of that story and the good news that eventually came and the great doctors that were brought into your life and the prayer and ultimately how it reprioritized your life for you, putting football second and putting Christ first.
I think the one the one phrase I could respond to this is God always has a plan. Mm-hmm. The person I can relate to most in the Bible is the story of Joseph. I feel like I had this great plan, this great vision of all these things that were going to happen. And I had to go through suffering. Like Acts 14:22 says, like a man must endure many hardships to enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, this was my hardship. This was my opportunity to grow closer to God. And like while it was not fun and while it wasn't easy, like I wouldn't take back any of it because I continued to grow with him, and I continued to like see more of him. Like he took something worldly away from me that like was giving me so much joy, and he was like, "No, but I want you for this." And it's the faithfulness that he restored that. He was like, I'm not taking you away from this forever. I just want you to see more of me right now so that when you go back to this, you're not playing for you, you're playing for me. He asked for us to glorify him in all things. And I think like he was like, you've put too much of your identity in this because you can fail at football. But if you put it in me, you can't fail at that.
I think about our conversations as father and son. And there was a time when, as you mentioned earlier, sports was all we could talk about. Now, faith seems to be all that we can talk about. And that's a big transition. Talk a little bit about where you are in life and what your vision for the future is, because Joseph certainly ended up with a vision that was powerful for the future.
Yeah, for me, I feel like I've been called into going to ministry. It fills my soul. Getting to watch Jesus restore others and knowing that I have nothing to do with it is not only humbling, but so beautiful. Like I got to watch God in my own life take me from this wretched sinner to someone who just comes before him in awe every day. And it's so beautiful to see how Christ restores and redeems all of us, how we were so broken, but only through his power we made a new creation. And all the chains and all the burdens that we have, they're left behind when we follow him. And I think the reason I love ministry, I love serving God is because I get to see that in others. And it's the same reason like I was so inspired by your story and watching you is like Bonhoeffer, a famous theologian, says the Christ in my brother is stronger than the Christ in me. And when you get to see that in others, it only strengthens your own faith. And for me, every time I see someone get saved, every time I see someone get discipled, every time I see someone see more of Jesus, I feel like my faith strengthens, that I get to see more of him through them.
Recently, you've had several really unique opportunities to take this desire to be a pastor and live it out. On March the 1st, you got a chance to be the only kid in the entire freshman class to speak and preach to your fellow Wheaton students. And then just last week, you were here at a private school in Phoenix City, Alabama, and in Smith Station, and preaching to all of their student body. Talk for a minute about the role that God has built for you in beginning to speak and how you feel equipped or unequipped to really fulfill that role.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think for me, God's called me to spread his word, but to never forget that it's his word, not my own. A verse I live by, which is actually my bracelet, is John 7:18, and basically the passage is talking about how like where they're asking Jesus like, where does your knowledge come from? Where is this coming from? Like, how can you speak so well? You've never been trained. He's like, well, my knowledge isn't coming from me; it's coming from God. Like, and the man who speaks on his own is doing so to gain personal glory, but the man who speaks for God is a man of truth. And I think this is something I want to live by. And like, as someone who wants to be a pastor, it's like, remember, man, so this isn't about you. It's about him. Talk about how you were the sinner and he transformed you. And I think every time I speak, I want to glorify God. Every time, the reason he's using me and giving me the opportunities is because, like, man, I'm still so prideful, but I'm doing this for him. I'm doing this so others can see him. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. Mansell, you have done so many incredible things at such a young age that I know, both good and bad, that will help young kids. And so I'd love to ask you to give some advice to a couple of different groups of people.
Okay.
First, if you could give advice to 13-year-old Mansell, looking back now, what advice would you say to 13-year-old Mansell?
Dwell in the word, start praying, depend on others. God's calls us to love him and then be in community. Love thy neighbor, man. And I think for me, it's just, I would really wish that I would have gotten more involved, and a community is going to push me towards the cross. I think the biggest thing is, like, just like I said earlier, like, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Surround yourself with people who are going to push you in the right directions. And I would tell myself, like, not only get involved, spend time with God because he's the only person who can change you, but spend time with his people. Spend time with people who are going to push you in the right direction. Yeah.
Love that. From a perspective of a kid who's been through difficulties with their family, what advice would you give to somebody whose parents are struggling, whose family is struggling, who may not have a parent at home, only having one parent at home? What advice would you give to someone about how to find Christ in those moments?
Seek his face. Seek him. It's like God says, I'm like in Revelation, like I'm going to knock at the door, but you got to open it. Mm-hmm. Go open the door. Go find him. He's waiting. He's looking. Like Psalm 23, it's just a known part. It's like, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Even in your darkest valley, in your darkest moment, God's with you. Just turn towards the light to see him.
Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing.
And the best piece of advice that you feel like you've gotten in the last year, somebody has breathed into you.
Ooh. In the last year, that's like a lot.
Just one or two.
I don't know. Like you asked, like such a broad period of time.
How about this?
Narrow it down for me.
All right. Coach Jesse Scott, the head coach on your football team, is an empowered, God-loving, God-fearing man. And I would love to know kind of, if you were to say from him or maybe even an assistant coach, what has been the best advice you've gotten as a football player, but also as a follower of Christ?
I want to talk on what Coach Nightingale told me in his office during our exit meetings. He said, don't let, we have a Wheaton football, man. It's an incredible program. It's everything. And everyone always says, like in all the senior speeches, they say, let the program change you, freshman. He's like, let the program do something different in you. But Coach Nightingale, said, no, let God change you. Mm-hmm. Let God change you. So what I would tell anybody is let God change you. Don't try to be anything other than yourself. Let Christ change you because he formed you, he made you new, and he, before all time, made you the art that you are. You don't have to be different for anybody else. You don't have to be someone other than yourself. Just let God change you. Lean on him and let him and become more of him.
That is awesome. So before we go to some other questions that we've got laying here, I'll ask you one last one.
Okay.
Mansell, the camp counselor, going this summer. I know he is 100% fired up and jumping out of the gym, but what does Mansell what influence does he want to leave with these campers as he goes to Kanakuk this summer?
You know, as someone who went to Kanakuk and remembering the joy you walk away with after going to a place like that, I just want them to understand that no matter what troubles, no matter what hardships they go in life, that God is always with them and he loves them no matter what. And I think we get so caught up in our world that the two biggest lies, like I say all the time, the devil tells you is, one, before you sin, that it's not that big of a deal, and two, after you sin, you're no longer worthy of God's love. Well, I would tell these kids, doesn't matter what you do, you're always going to be in God's love because the sacrifice he made for you and I on the cross will always be done. And it's always enough.
I love that. The two lies the enemy tells and preventing on both sides of it that it's not, there's not that much to fear to start with, and it has a greater impact than you even thought afterwards. Yeah. And so thanks for sharing that. All right. So as I understand, the rules of this next game are we're going to each pick up a card answering a question that neither one of us has seen, and that we're going to then each answer the question. Do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
You can go first.
Okay, I'm pulling the card here, and it says, fill in the blank. Thank you for encouraging me to blank.
Thank you for encouraging me to speak. I think we can all get so nervous and I'll get so worried, but when I've had incredible opportunities to speak, you've always encouraged me, told me that I'm doing it for him, not for myself, and just lean on him. Yeah.
Thank you for encouraging me to get in the Word in different ways. You've encouraged me through some recent Bible studies and specific prayer times to look at some different creeds, to look at some different things, and to investigate praying in some different ways. Things that I really just stick with what I traditionally love and probably need to be challenged. And so thank you for that.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, my turn. If this was our last weekend spending time together, what is the one thing you would like me to never forget?
That's a tough one. I would say the one thing I would never want you to forget is that as your earthly father, I did what I could, but it's your heavenly Father who you need to follow and spend your life and, schedule your life after. And if you do it after me, you're going to find failure. But if you do it after him, you're going to find the perfect sonship.
I've got to watch you become so new, but I think the devil tries to attack you with shame. And what I would tell you is that you're made a new creation, and that to all the people who watch you, and all the people watching, that you're made new, and all the stuff is left behind. God forgets every sin, every wrong deed you ever made, and I'd want you to remember that everything we've ever done wrong, he forgets, and that you're made new, and you are perfect and good enough for him.
That means a tremendous amount, Mansell. It really does. All right. What is the hardest thing about being you right now?
I overstretch myself so bad. I think I can go 150% every single day, and I don't get enough sleep, and then I get hit with these days that I'm just exhausted, so tired. But, I love it. It's just sometimes I think I need to do a better job with my sleep schedule and stuff.
All right. Being stretched is the answer for me too, except it's different. For me, my younger two kids live in Atlanta, and I go back and forth 2, 3, 4 days a week between Columbus and Atlanta. And so I feel like a man with a foot in two canoes. And I don't know if you know what happens with a man in a foot in two canoes. He ends up in the water. And so I'm doing my best to stay stable and to stay strong, but that's what's got me stretched the most at this time.
Yeah. My turn. All right, sweet. What is the greatest lesson you learned this year? Yes, we are halfway through 2023.
Wow.
That's crazy.
That is crazy.
I'm getting old, man.
The greatest lesson that I've learned in 2023. I think it's that never underestimate the power of the miracles that God can create. There have been some things going on in my life, which I'm sure I'll get into in a future podcast, that I never dreamed would happen, could happen, or were possible. And I will just tell you that had I not been open to the fact that God could want something like that for my life, that I would have never been able to conceptualize it or perhaps even rejected it. But he has opened up doors that are truly, truly something I never expected.
For me, greatest lesson I've learned this year is the power of community. Mm-hmm. Whether confessing with other people, talking about how you're struggling in life, celebrating your wins, just the power of being with other people. God says, love thy neighbor. Yeah. And when you're struggling and when you're hurting, Galatians 6:2 is a verse I always refer to. Bear one another's burdens, and in this way you fulfill the law of Christ. Mm-hmm. That's so powerful and so good because God has called us to walk with one another, and we think we can do it on our own, but the one advice I would tell somebody is depend on others because God's put you in a specific community of people to be with others. Mm-hmm. He comes first, but then he said, love the people around you.
Awesome. Name one thing you admire most about each other, speaking to their character. I'll go first.
Hey, you go first. I got to think about this for a second.
Flat out, the truth. You do not veer from, shy away from, or try to bend in any way the truth. Sometimes that may make it a little bit abrasive, but most of the time it makes it as loving and as real as anything I can imagine. And so I just truly admire how you adhere to God's truth.
Man, that's amazing. Thank you for that. Your love. For me, even though sometimes I know you want to respond, sometimes I just need someone to listen to me, someone to just be there for me. And I know sometimes you want to talk or you want to tell me something, but I know that in all points, whether you're in a meeting, whether you're, if I called you, you're going to pick up and you're going to respond and you're going to be there for me no matter what. And I think you're just endless love. Man, it's the closest, like the Father's love. Like it's the reason they call it the Father because it's the closest thing I feel like I can get to of God's love here on earth.
Wow.
Is how you love me. That he would drop any ball, he would do anything to be there for me. You've done for me.
I'm so humble do you think that of me?
And I think for me, it's just, again, it's caused me to see Christ more. That he put those character traits in you so that I could see that.
Wow. Thank you, Mansell.
What are your top 3 memories together and why?
Oh, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
All right, let's go back and forth, and let's get a couple out there. 10th birthday trip. We flew all the way across the country.
Yep.
We went to Salmon Fish in British Columbia. We stayed at perhaps the coolest resort I've ever stayed at, and we had an absolute blast. From watching World Cup soccer to eating the world's best food and perhaps the most memorable food of all time.
Smoked wood ice cream.
Smoked wood ice cream. I couldn't decide if it was the coolest thing I'd ever eaten or the most disgusting thing I'd ever eaten, but it was addictive.
It's wildly addictive, yeah. I'll go for this one. My first Cleveland Browns game, man, so fun. And I know this would be a hot topic, but everyone doesn't like Baker Mayfield. But man, he went 16 for 16 in the second half. And then our boy Nick Chubb, 92 yards to the house. I mean, that was an incredible game. It was a lot of fun.
You know, how you pick the world's worst franchise of all time to be the world's biggest fan of, I don't know. Like taking you to Cleveland and going to that game and taking every piece of clothing I own because of how cold it was going to be. and just enjoying that moment in the sunshine with you. That was a special trip.
Yeah, that was awesome.
I think going to our first Wheaton football game, seeing campus for the first time, going up and standing there, you, me, and your mom, and being on campus and going up to the sign for Christ and his kingdom and taking a picture underneath that sign and then being welcomed not only to the game, but on the field with the team, being recruited and hearing the head coach give perhaps one of the most impassioned speeches I've ever heard not about being a football player, but about being a man of God. And so that would be one of my greatest memories.
My next one's kind of like a compiling of nights. I think some of the most valuable nights I've ever had in my life are just, us when I first moved to your house and we would watch every single Duke basketball game together. Every single one. And it's like, they were awful. They went like 13-13 that year and it was so disappointing. We watched every single one. And we just sat there, and I remember like the incredible memories I have of just having these long conversations, getting mad at the TV of why we're missing shots. And I was just like, but it was just the compiling of these nights that we just got to be with one another, being in community, having real conversation. Like it just, I couldn't narrow that down to one night because we did that like 40 times.
Yeah.
And it was so fun. Yeah.
All right. Favorite book of the Bible or verse?
That's a loaded question. I mean, if you answer other than the Gospels, is it like wrong? Okay, I'll answer. I have a couple. I love, like for Old Testament, I love Ruth. I think nothing tells the story better in the Old Testament of God's love through hard times than Ruth does. Is that like and it's not even about Ruth, it's about Naomi. And it talks about God's faithfulness. And like, look at Naomi. She lost her husband, her 2 sons in the middle of famine. She had to go back into God's house after walking away, and God completely restored her and redeemed her line through Ruth. And I think it just tells the story of God's love is like even when the hard times and even when suffering comes, he is still with you. He is still walking with you. And I just love that. For the New Testament, I absolutely love John. I think John tells the story of who Jesus is the best way. I love the theology behind it. I love there's just so much goodness when I read it. I guess if I had to like one of, I think for me, Philippians. I think it just talks so like Philippians chapter 2. If I had to give like a verse, it's like chapter 2, 1-12, I believe. The passage title is "Imitating Christ's Humility." For me, pride is my downfall. Pride's always been my downfall. Like, oh, it's about you, Mansell, not about God. And I think for me, it's like, it talks about the passage of how, like, we should imitate Christ's humility. He was humble enough to go up on the cross for us. He was humble enough to be a servant. And I think, like, for me, it's like, oh, if the God of the whole universe did this, and who am I to think I'm doing anything for myself?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Well, the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are amazing. But I'm like you. I'm attracted to and love the word of John.
Yeah.
I just believe that it is so direct and it is so straightforward and it's just hard to miss, that for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son, that whoso believed in him shall perish, but never perish, but have eternal life. Those are verses that you can't hide from them. They are what they are. And I've always loved that directness of John.
Yeah, that's awesome.
If you could travel anywhere right now, where would you travel?
Okay, I have never been to the Holy Lands, and I want to go so bad because everyone tells me when you go, the Bible goes from being black and white to in color. And it's like, I want to walk where Jesus walked. And I'm like, that would be so cool.
All right.
Yeah.
Note to the audience, I gave him for his high school graduation a trip to Israel, and we have just not gotten it. Hopefully next summer will be the time, but we are going to do that. For me, the other one, to see God's painting of the beauty, is the plains of Africa. I would love to see the animal migrations. I would love to see the wild. I would love to see safari and see what it is out there that God created in such beauty that I don't think exists anywhere else on this earth.
Yeah, that's awesome.
One last question.
What is one thing that you do that I love that I have never told you?
I'll let you go first.
No, you got it, man.
think it's the way you love your brothers and sister. Not that those relationships have always been easy. In fact, it may be some of the difficulty in those that is why I admire you so much in terms of those relationships. But you have just wanted to mentor and love, especially your younger brother and your younger sister. And I admire that. I think that, sibling relationships are hard. And you have made your sister love you. You have made your brother Knox darn near a disciple. It looks up to you with all the love in the world. And you have chased after your brother Dan with a fervor for Christ and really tried your best to help him see some of the wonderful things that you see. And so I would say it's how you have gone after your siblings.
For me, and that's something we don't talk about enough, and we are on the redeemed, so this has to do with that. For me, it's how you've made yourself so vulnerable. I think we've created a culture where we say masculinity is keeping everything to yourself, is handling by yourself, but you literally get on a podcast every week and talk about the things you've done wrong, the things that you have messed up and how God's redeemed them. And I think you being so vulnerable, setting a good example for men of how to be Christ-like and that we are all redeemed through him has been so inspiring for me. And just saying, look, I'm going to lay myself on the cross to be crucified, going over things I've done in my life, and so that he can have the glory, I think has been so inspiring for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so to our audience out there, Mansell is an incredible example of the 4 kids that I have, and the proof that God raises kids despite parents making all types of mistakes, problems, failings, screwing things up. And I just say to our audience, have hope, put your hope in God, and continue to know that he has your kids, because so often we feel like we're just holding on for dear life. Today has been an awesome experience, Mansell. I thank you for coming on the show. I thank you for sharing your heart and talking about the powerful verses and books and everything else that speak to your heart and the man you're becoming. And to our audience, I thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen to this important episode. I want to tell you there's a lot happening at The Redeemed. Please take the opportunity to go to our website, sign up for our newsletter. Please listen to our podcast and feel free to leave a discussion or a recommendation or review of our podcast on Apple Podcasts or any podcast level of your choice. And thank you for also considering coming to our August 24th conference where Tim Tebow will be speaking, called The Restored. We're going to have a very special night that night. We are having 500 to 600 men come together for a night of fellowship and excitement. And Tim is going to bring a powerful message of hope that I know is so needed. So thank you to everyone today for being a part of this show. God bless and Godspeed.